Hey guys, so welcome to Brew Your Market. So we are here for another episode with Karen Saldanha from Dabble. So hi Karen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be
Yeah,
here.
thank you. It's our honor. It's an honor to even talk to people who have done so much in life. So I think the pleasure is ours. So before we start, I'll tell people what Dabble is very shortly, so that you can take over and give us more detailed explanation of what Dabble is. So as we all know, Dabble came into fame when we saw you on Shark Tank. So I guess that is something everyone in India knows right now, and we also know that you've been incubated under the great NSRCEL. So that is something, even as a startup, even having worked on a few companies, that's still a dream of ours too, to get incubated in such a prestigious institution, something. So yeah, so tell us how Dabble happened, what Dabble is. We'd like to know more about you.
So this is my favorite question, actually.
Okay.
And to begin with, I would love to say that, it also happens to be our fourth anniversary of Dabble.
Okay.
The
Nice.
day we actually started in NSRCEL way back in 2019. So it's a very
Hmm.
special day in that sense. And it's also holy. So it's a celebration of colors today.
Yeah.
So coincidentally, there's a lot of things, which
Yes.
are,
Yeah.
in connection to what we do.
Hmm. Yeah.
So just to begin with our journey and how we started. So Neha is my co-founder, and we
Yeah.
met at an expressive art therapy program way back in 2014.
Hmm.
And in 2017, okay, I have two kids. So
Okay.
my son is 1 year old and my daughter is 3 years old.
Hmm.
And Neha's at that point of time, and Neha's son was then 1 year old. So that point of time, because we had met at this expressive art therapy program, we became really close friends. And you know how moms are in their early, in the
Yeah.
first few years of their being
Hmm.
parents. There are a lot of challenges you face in the parenting journey. So we used to
Hmm.
talk a lot. We used to meet up on play dates. And
Hmm.
one of the things that very intuitively we started carrying with us is the art products, where our children used to play with the art products.
Hmm.
Uh, but what we noticed was these art products were coming mostly from abroad, from the US and Europe. And for some reason, both of us did not find it safe to give products from India, and we couldn't find anything for a 1 year old then.
Hmm.
Just to give you an example, a crayon a pencil shaped crayon, a 1 year
Hmm.
old cannot hold. And typically, what does a 1 year old do? Put that in the mouth. And
Yes.
instinctively, right, what do you do
Hmm.
as a parent? You stop the child saying, don't
Yeah.
do this, and you take that
Hmm.
art product and put it inside,
Hmm.
right? But at that point of time, because we had gone through an expressive art therapy program, we had experienced the power of arts in learning, in the space of healing, and we wanted this for our kids, but there was nothing in India. So that got
Hmm.
us thinking, saying, why are there no safe art products in India? Why is there nothing creative that we want to give our kids?
Hmm.
Uh, so the entire process of the Dabble journey started with this question,
Hmm.
and then it got us thinking, saying, how about, how, sort of creating something or on our own, trying to
Hmm.
understand what's in the market and what are some of the challenges that parents face because of which they're not introducing art early to kids.
Hmm.
So that's how the whole journey of Dabble started.
Hmm.
But then the interesting part about it was that both of us didn't come from a any kind of chemistry background, or we did not come from product development background, but there was a passion to create something.
Hmm.
So what we did initially, it was a lot of fun. We um, thought, okay, let's actually start maybe making our own crayons. So
Hmm.
we converted our little kitchen into a
Okay.
like a lab.
Okay.
So we sourced a lot of what do you say, like the waxes for crayons from different parts of the country.
Hmm.
And I remember something very funny at that point of time, the beeswax that we got. We
Hmm.
wanted to, there's a certain melting point for the beeswax, okay,
Okay.
which we were going to be using on crayons. And my fear was, what if it bursts, okay, in the kitchen? What if it, sort of it catches
Yeah.
fire? So we, sourced these glasses, the lab glasses, wore
Hmm.
those. And we did our first experiment way back in 2017. And
Yeah.
it was so much fun actually, working with these waxes, creating our first crayon. And our little kids then were the guinea pigs for us to actually test out everything. Our
Okay.
husbands were a part of that process also. They tried the crayons, and that was such an aha moment that we had created something on our own. And that's when we decided that, how about taking this further? So yeah, that's the beginning of the Dabble really. In 2017 August is when
Mm.
we created our first crayon in our kitchens.
Yeah, so from there to having 10 plus products right now, that's
Yeah.
a good step. And I understand how it is, to do a lot of experiments with your own self, and not knowing whether it's gonna even burst or not. That must have been fun. But yeah, so tell me one thing. So a
Yeah.
lot of people have this problem when they have their startup journey. Like say
Mhm.
for example, you moved from becoming a corporate trainer to this.
Yeah.
So there's no connection, as you mentioned. There's no connection between corporate training and doing something in your own kitchen that might be useful to little kids out there. So
Right.
what did you go through in your mind when you wanted to make that switch? So
Okay. So that's a great question. So
okay.
for me, very honestly, I'm a believer of what Steve Jobs once said, that
Mm,
you don't connect the dots going forward, but you
mm,
can connect the dots going backwards. So when I look back at my life today, I did my first 10 years of my corporate career with ICICI Prudential, which is an
mm,
insurance company, and then it was more like a startup. So it gave me a lot of space to sort of explore my own self. My So what I know, my some of my learnings from this working those 10 years were that I really enjoyed working in the area of transformation and creation. So
mm,
creation was something that always excited me, bringing something new to
mm,
life
mm,
during my corporate journey.
mm,
So I started my career in sales, after which I moved into, corporate training, which was again in the area of transformation because I wanted to create more salespeople like
mm,
who can be successful. And when they
mm,
did that, it gave me a lot of joy that
mm,
somebody who just joined the company and then is able to be a star salesperson or even
mm,
get his bag his first deal. I think that
mm,
was very exciting for me.
mm,
And that sort of remained very close to my heart in the area of, sort of transforming or facilitating the area of creative creation. And
mm,
I was in the corporate for about 10 years, after which uh, I felt that there was something, sort of not allowing me to sort of explore that in a bigger way.
mm,
And the journey of transformation and
mm,
creating, helping people grow. That's when I moved out, and I didn't know honestly, at that point of time, I was not sure what I wanted to do. I
mm,
was very successful in what I did, but um, I knew, and I wanted to just follow my heart and find out what is that, how I wanted to spend the rest of my life. So when I moved out, I joined the Women Entrepreneurship Program at NSRCEL at
okay.
Bangalore. And those 3 months was a very reflective journey for me, where I identified there were two things that I wanted to do. One is
Mm,
work with children and create something for kids,
mm,
and also work in the area of transformation. But I was not sure even then what I wanted to do.
mm,
I thought of education, starting a school, but that didn't really connect.
mm,
So I continue to do my leadership training and coaching program, working with corporates for about 4, 5 years. Then I started my own corporate training practice
mm,
after ICICI. And then I stumbled upon the expressive art therapy program, which I was talking about, where I experienced the whole magic of arts in early childhood.
mm,
Um, and post which, once my kids were growing up, I mean, those early years, that's
mm.
when I met Neha, and
Okay.
we realized that both of us wanted to do something in the area of working with children, and then
Mm,
we stumbled upon the arts. So it wasn't nothing was it was such an intuitive process
mm,
of figuring out
mm,
and also listening to your heart. I think as
mm.
entrepreneurs, one of the
Yeah.
important things is to be able to listen to your heart and to find opportunities which sort of
Mm,
connect to what you want to do. So
mm.
you're constantly discovering yourself. And that's what
Yeah.
happened to me. And I see that, when I look back, the dots are connecting.
Yeah. I mean, see, as an entrepreneur, yeah, as you mentioned, it's always, to follow your heart in a lot of areas, because a lot of people have money. Money is not a issue in the world right now, but just having that, having that thing in you to take that first step towards something, that's what matters in an entrepreneur. And as you mentioned, NSRCEL, so I just wanted to talk to you about for that a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
So, how did NSRCEL shaped your, like your product, your company, or how did it shape that?
Yeah, that so with NSRCEL, like I said earlier, I had done my women entrepreneurship program
Hmm.
in 2010. And
Okay.
when we started, so when Dabble happened, this was in 2017, so around between 2017 and 19. Uh, so we were in the process of research and development. We were working on our products. We
Hmm.
also hired scientists and cosmetologists to help us
Okay.
commercialize the product. So there was a
Hmm.
lot that was happening to shape
Hmm.
the entire process of launching the company.
Hmm.
So in 2019 December is when we got incubated at IIM Bangalore.
Hmm.
So that was such a turning point. That so what happened was that though we had a lot of idea, we had the entire structure in place, we didn't know how to sort of launch it into the market. Like, what do we do
Hmm.
next?
Hmm.
That's when, it was a blessing in disguise that, NSRCEL, mentors sort of helped us sort of figure these things out.
Hmm.
I remember one specific meeting, okay,
Hmm.
we were talking about uh, launching and when are we going to launch. So
Hmm.
there's one question that was asked to us. I remember at the meeting,
Hmm.
give me a date. When are you going to launch? So that
Okay.
was scary as entrepreneurs because we had the idea, we had everything in
Hmm.
place, but the fact that you have to now get into the market was the biggest,
Hmm.
fear. There was a fear
Yeah.
that are we going to fail? Is this going to work? So I constantly are going through a lot of
Hmm.
emotions, right? Of
Hmm.
high to low, to fears to joys. So that's when this date was asked, and we immediately, Neha and I had a chat. It was my mom's birthday on the 10th of March, so we said, okay, that's a moment we can celebrate, and
Hmm.
then it's declared saying it's going to be March 10th.
Okay.
And at that point of time, it was just putting that out into the universe.
Hmm.
It was so magical because after that, the 3 months, we had the product executed in the manufacturing facility to coming up with how are we going to launch it. So we thought of a training program at NSRCEL. So the first launch happened at NSRCEL with 100 parents coming there and
Hmm.
experiencing the joy of colors and bonding over play. If
Okay.
not for NSR Cell, we wouldn't have had probably that launch pad or that
Hmm.
that kind of motivation to start. I think
Hmm.
the faith that you take the first step and the next step will automatically start unveiling to you.
Hmm. Yes.
So that was a magical experience. And then, of course, you have mentors to support you. So
Hmm.
literally, you can say it's like a baby coming into this world and
Hmm.
being surrounded by a lot of support system. And when you're ready to then fly, also to
Hmm.
let go and say, now you can fly, not to hold you back.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that's a very beautiful journey about NSR Cell that we went through from incubation to being able to let go. And, even
Hmm.
this opportunity today has come to us through NSR Cell. So I'm
Yeah.
so grateful to be a part of the entire
Hmm.
process of learning and growth from NSR Cell.
Yeah. That's very nicely, you put it very nicely. So yeah, so it's obviously, whenever you give your products to, like the actual audience, the reaction
Yeah,
that you get from them is priceless. And NSRCL gave you that. And I think as a entrepreneur, as a product developer, there is nothing that can compete with that. So something, when someone uses our product for the first time and gives us a honest, even though without talking, that's the reaction in their face that says it all. So I think
absolutely.
that is something we all look up to as
Priceless.
a, yeah, it's
Yeah.
priceless. So that is something every startup founder looks up to. So yeah, so I want to talk to you about your philosophy for a moment. So your philosophy is centered around free play is healthy play, right? So Dabble is focused on free play. So how did this come to mind? So I remember you speaking about your kids and how you had to take stuff away from them because they were not allowed to put it in their mouth. And I have a niece and nephew who are under 3 years old, and I know that's how babies, that's the first sense of,
First instinct.
recognition that babies
Yeah.
do. So anything you give it to, give it to my niece, she puts it in her mouth. It doesn't matter whatever it is, and taking stuff away from her, it's very hard. She'll start crying. So it's a very difficult process also, being a parent. So is the ideology and the philosophy centered around that, or is there a different story?
Yeah, so let me just take a minute to talk about what we mean by free play is healthy play.
Okay.
Um, I would like to take you back to, maybe 30 years ago, right?
Okay.
How life was for kids.
Hmm.
They would
Hmm.
play very freely.
Hmm.
If you walked into a neighborhood, you would see children playing outside. And children playing outside without the adults being around.
Hmm.
That's how life was. And there was so much more freedom for kids to just be and enjoy their childhood. And that's what I remember of my childhood.
Hmm.
30 years later, when my kids are growing up,
Hmm.
what's happening? You will walk into neighborhoods, you'll hardly find children outside. They're playing, they're mostly inside. And parents, like me, or in the today, people have this irrational fear that something can go wrong. And there
Hmm.
is also this helicopter parenting that is coming where you are constantly monitoring what your child is doing.
Yeah.
And that's scary, right? Because you're taking away, the basic essence of freedom from a child,
Hmm.
just be and to sort of experience life
Hmm.
in their own eyes, right? But and through play, what do children learn? I mean, children, it's a gift for kids through which they're solving problems, they're finding
Hmm.
their own selves.
Hmm.
When I say play, it's self-directed play, not just going to a football ground and following instructions, but
Hmm.
just playing. And so through play, children are discovering themselves. And in the early years, the aspect of social skills or the aspect of cognitive development, everything, very naturally develops through play, leading to balanced growth.
Hmm.
So our philosophy comes from that space of,
Hmm.
happier children are healthier. The children, happier the children are, they are healthier, right? So
Hmm.
while expressing themselves freely, when you're giving them freedom, they are able to be happier, and those children, happier children, can be healthier. So that's the entire philosophy of free play is healthy play. Now,
Hmm.
how does that manifest in terms of our products?
Hmm.
Uh, the first one, the whole philosophy that our products are safe,
Hmm.
that a parent doesn't need to hover around a child anymore,
Okay.
leading to the child being able to be free with colors. No
Hmm.
one is going to tell you, now don't do this, now don't put it in your mouth, now don't put it on the floor. So
Hmm.
imagine the number of restrictions when a
Hmm.
child is creative.
Yeah.
And we are taking that away from a parent saying, just be worry free. Your child
Yeah.
can
Hmm.
play free, right? The second aspect, when we're talking about free play, healthy play is, like I said, when a child is freely, expressing through colors, which is very natural to them because a child can draw even before they can write.
Hmm.
They can sing before
Yeah.
they can speak. So art is very natural to them. Allow them to do so, which leads to cognitive, emotional, social, and their motor growth, which is so important in early years because the brain
Hmm.
development happens when they play, and our products are also sensory in nature. The more you touch and feel the products, it leads to brain connections,
Hmm.
allowing them a better, learning outcomes in the future. So
Hmm.
being more happier learners in the future.
Hmm.
Okay, and also allowing them to be creative in the process because I
Hmm.
think the future generation needs the ability to be creative. That's one of the
Yeah.
important C's, I would say:
Hmm.
communication and being able to be creative. These are important aspects of
Hmm.
for success in the future. So that's what we're doing at Dabble, creating the
Hmm.
foundation for kids to be able to creatively express themselves.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, whatever you said is, 100% truth, because, I still remember, because, my sister doesn't let my niece or nephew touch the phone no matter what. So the
Right.
only time they're allowed to use the phone is when they're talking to their father, who sometimes goes abroad. So that is the only time when they can touch their phone, or, communicate with the family who's living in another area. So I know, because as a kid, we all had this opportunity, to play with all these pen, papers, all these
Yeah.
slates, and all these chalk pieces and everything. But kids these days, they don't get to do that, because, as you mentioned, there's nothing that is, like, that is available, that is, very safe for kids to do use right now. So as you mentioned, a lot of helicopter parenting is going on, and I think Dabble is, it's solving that exactly. And I think it's also very comforting for moms, when it comes from another mom saying that my kid has personally used this, and my kid is very healthy, safe, and we are proud that we've done this for our kid. And that is something, it's also an extra layer of assurity that any company can give, because both the founders are moms, and they personally used their product and tested it with their own kids. Yeah, that is more than any other assurance I want. So I will make sure when my nephew comes back, I'm going to gift something from Dabble. So
I'm
I will
looking
make sure
forward
of
to
that.
that.
Yeah.
And like you rightly pointed out, because screen time is today,
Hmm.
because children are indoors, the easy access is screen time. But what does
Hmm.
that do? There are a lot of developmental delays that are happening
Hmm.
with children being too much exposed to screen time, right?
Hmm.
Because there is no, it's a very passive way of engaging. It's not,
Yeah.
and play is a very active way of engaging.
Hmm.
Even during the pandemic, there were lots of parents who took on to the arts, not
Hmm.
just parents, even adults, because
Yeah.
it's a very healing process of just engaging with the arts and learning through them.
Hmm.
And our colors also are very specially designed, keeping in mind the aspects of, early childhood.
Hmm.
In the past, you had a lot of art products in the market, but the difference here is that we created something keeping in
Hmm.
mind the needs of kids
Hmm.
and the age
Yeah.
group of 1 to 6.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's take a small turn from what we've spoken about. So, we all know Dabble came, into the spotlight when we saw you on Shark Tank, right?
Yeah.
So, I know the company is 4 years old now, but we all got to know, the country got to know when we were featured on Shark Tank. So, what made you decide that we have to go to Shark Tank, and how was that experience? Because still, for every single startup founder out there, being on Shark Tank, whether it's getting funding or not, just being there, being in that room, getting the chance to pitch to these people out there, that
Yeah.
is a dream come true for every single one. So how was that experience, and what made you to decide that we are going to do this, we are going to go to Shark Tank?
Yeah, I think Shark Tank, as you said, you just pointed out, saying we got to know you through Shark Tank.
Yeah.
I think that is the biggest sort of blessing of, going through this whole process of
Hmm.
going to Shark Tank and being discovered,
Hmm.
especially for a company which is bootstrapped. Um,
Hmm.
you might have to, spend in millions to be
Hmm.
able to get this kind of
Yeah.
visibility,
Hmm.
which, by being aired on Shark Tank, you get it, in seconds, the millions of people get to know about you.
Hmm.
Uh, so I think what made us decide to go to Shark Tank, one, definitely when we got to know, again, NSRCEL came to play. They
Hmm.
talked to us about it. There were a few brands which had already gone to Shark Tank,
Hmm.
and they had spoken about the impact of what it had had on their business.
Hmm.
I also personally used to watch the US Shark Tank, and it
Hmm.
was so exciting to see how an idea which you have can be sort of, you can translate that into like a pitch which reaches millions, and
Hmm.
also to convince the sharks. I think that is such an great process of discovering yourself as an entrepreneur, also growing.
Hmm.
And for both Neha and me, I think learning has been a very important part of our value system right from the
Hmm.
beginning. And when it came to Shark Tank, there was no question that should
Hmm.
we do it or not do it. Yes, we will do it, but
Hmm.
so we went ahead and applied, and there were multiple rounds that we had to go through.
Hmm.
And for me, the biggest challenge was I've never Hindi has not been my
Hmm.
comfort. I come from Bangalore, so
Okay.
pitching in Hindi is not
Hmm.
something I would have dreamt of, or in my wildest dreams that I would be standing there and talking in Hindi. So that was actually a little worrisome for me. While Neha, felt a little concerned that she had never done a presentation in her lifetime, and she was up there. We are both standing there in front of the world. It's though you say it's sharks, you are
Yeah.
actually pitching to the world.
Yes.
There were a lot of emotions, of course, excitement being one of them, but there was a lot of anxiety as well that how are we going to do this? But I think once you go there, the kind of support that you get from the team to sort of help you structure
Hmm.
the pitch, and multiple practices on the
mm,
script. And that itself, I think, is a lot of reassurance, the team supporting you. And
mm,
once you go in there, the sharks also are quite friendly.
mm,
Of course, they ask you a lot of things about your business, which is a great discovery process. Again, I would call that in one word metamorphosis, because
mm,
it is just like amazing in terms of what it does to you once you come back from Shark Tank. Because the next
mm,
3 months before we get ahead, every day we were thinking of how do we, become better at what we're doing?
mm,
Because there were so many questions that got uncovered during that time of how we can become a bigger, better brand.
mm.
So the kind of growth we have seen personally as well as, for Dabble from the time we came back from Shark Tank has been immense. So yeah, that I think a- anybody and everybody should go for Shark Tank. It's, if you have an opportunity, don't miss it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, anyone who is in the startup world would love to be there on Shark Tank. But so, someone from Shark Tank is watching. We are also available. So, yeah, putting that aside. So, I just want to, add a couple more questions to the same Shark Tank one. So,
Yeah.
how your marketing changed, before Shark Tank and after Shark Tank? Because, as you said, more than the money that the sharks give you, and apart from the advice, marketing is one of the biggest advantages that anyone can get from Shark Tank. So, okay, I don't need an exact number from you, but you can tell me percentages also. So, how much of your money that you are putting in before in marketing, and how it has changed after Shark Tank? Because coming from marketing background, I'd like to know what the actually happened there.
Right. So when we went before Shark Tank,
Hmm.
we had just started performance marketing. Before that, I think our whole strategy at Dabble has been about community.
Hmm.
Like our parents, so building a community of parents who really want to engage with their children with the arts.
Hmm.
And we believe that, a happy mom will tell 30 other or 100 other moms.
Hmm.
And that's the biggest validation for any product. It's not just about, putting your ads out there, because you can put a lot of money into ads, but you don't have a success, a testimony, a successful testimony is more powerful than just putting your
Hmm.
ads out there. So initially, because we're a bootstrap company, we had only put around 5 to 8% into marketing.
Hmm.
So that is how we had structured our marketing. But uh, as I said, just before we went to Shark Tank, so right now we have been putting about 20 to 25% into marketing. But the kind of results that we've seen, just to give you an example, right after Shark Tank, when we came back, once we were aired, in 3 days, we did the whole month's business. And we have seen a 3x growth in 1 month's time. And we have not seen a dip even since then, because
Hmm.
normally you might say it's a blip, but it wasn't a blip for us over a month. And we've been able to sustain that kind of growth. Why? Because we are using our social media as well as performance marketing and community in connect, really sort of connecting the three to be
Hmm.
able to put the word out there about Apple. And Shark Tank has taken the trust levels from from 5, I would say from 3 to 10 directly. That's
Hmm.
how much people trust you after Shark Tank.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, like your sales went 3x since you've been on Shark Tank. So, I just wanted to know. So,
Yeah,
there are not a lot of companies right now that do retail products. So, if you hear startup, the first thing that comes to your mind is it's a SaaS product. So that
yeah,
is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear startup. Someone who is sitting in front of a computer doing something.
right.
So that is what comes to mind. But being in retail space, and I have a own company that we do retail, a lot of retail businesses. But so I just want to know, so how your distribution channel is, because I know you do D2C through your website and everything. You have physical stores, and you also have partnership with other retailers. So what
Yeah.
according to you works best?
Okay, so that's a very good question, but I would say that there is no one size fits all.
Okay, yeah.
When we, right? So when we started,
Mm,
um, the the biggest sort of learning for us was that we tried everything.
mm,
We tried, online. We tried, physical stores. We tried workshops, putting out in schools, events. So as a startup, I think it's very important for you to try everything in the beginning, because that gives you a sense of what's working and what's not, and why something is working and why something is not.
Mm.
That's one aspect of it. Second thing is also very important to know your customer's persona and understanding where would this customer come and where would they buy.
Mm.
You know, where are you most likely to see these customers?
Mm.
Um, and so for us, I think initially once we tried everything, and we saw that D2C was the way to go, because one, it gives us immediate money for working capital,
Mm.
and the second thing is also it's very easy to scale.
Yeah.
You don't need deep pockets to do that.
Mm.
And through social, because we have a good community, it is
Mm.
easier to scale on D2C than on physical stores.
Mm.
And fortunately, we did that because during the pandemic, that's what helped us to
Yes.
sail through it. Because physical stores, no one was going,
Mm.
because when we launched in 2019 March, but end of the year itself, pandemic hit. We
Mm.
were planning to go on to more physical stores, but then we decided to change the strategy and move completely online. But
Mm.
as we speak, yes, we believe that even physical stores are very important, because it helps to build trust with the customer, because a
Yeah.
lot of customers want to see it, try, and then
Mm.
buy.
Mm.
So with that in mind, we are also expanding to physical stores like, we are on First Cry. We are
Mm.
looking at, Hamleys and other big stores, which will also help us build that credibility.
Mm.
So coming back, I think, yeah, you see what works for you, but try everything. It's
Mm.
important, and then you can slowly sort of work on what works best for you as a business.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, so every startup has to try out all the channels before focusing on just one. So, I assume Dabble's online store right now is generating most of the revenue right now.
Yes,
Yes. So, yeah,
95% of the revenue.
95% of the revenue.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. So for a retail product, 95% of revenue just from your own website is something that any company can dream of. Even going to like Amazon, Flipkart, and everything. But obviously these companies have to run and they take commissions out of it. So if it's coming through your own store and everything, that's obviously an added advantage to any retail thing. So okay, so you mentioned about first grade and everything, right? So I just want to ask you a few questions, because
Yeah.
kids product in the last decades, anything that kids have is become way too expensive, and it's very tough to crack into those markets. So
Right.
because I know for a fact, because I come from a very small town. Okay, so my town hardly has a population of 20 lakhs. My
Okay.
town hardly has a population of 20 lakhs. So for a town which has under 20 or 30 crore pati businesses, I see three first grades in it.
Hmm.
I see three first grades in it. And looking back, so what made you what made you say, okay, this is going to be kids and we are going to target all these retail stores and everything? And what makes you stand out apart from your motto and product and everything? What makes you stand out? Because I also knew from Shark Tank that you are the first company in India to put all the ingredients in back of a label. Because see, when it's us, when you're buying something for us, we don't exactly check the ingredients label and everything. But when it's for our kids or someone, for a niece and nephew, we always make sure we go through every single thing. We take dozens of times to go through all the things that is out there. What made you realize, okay, so this is going to be it? So what pushed you to that call?
So there are two parts of this question. One is in
Hmm.
terms of disclosing ingredients. Is that what you're
Yes.
talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm going to answer that first, because that's
Yeah.
a part of our product philosophy. So like I said, as mothers, we face the similar challenge. We were scared to give these products to our own kids, and
Hmm.
at a younger age, most parents are.
Hmm.
So transparency is a very important value at Dabble.
Hmm.
Transparency of ingredients, transparency of what commitments we give to our customers in terms of service, and also in terms of the education. I think education is a very important part of our philosophy at Dabble, that where we not just talk about product, but the Dabble is an experience.
Hmm.
So when I say Dabble is an experience, it's about engaging with the product, and also for the parent, when they are playing, when they're worry free, the connection with the parent and the child is built, because
Hmm.
no, after that, you're not saying don't do this, and
Hmm.
making enemies with your child. You're making friends with your child. So that's where
Yeah.
it's a joyous process.
Mm.
So that's how we are different in that sense.
Mm.
That safety is an important foundation for us, transparency, and also talking about which I mentioned earlier, that Dabble is an experience where
Mm.
parents can connect with the child.
Mm.
The second thing is that we've made the product so simple and engaging. Just to give you an example, our crayons come in shapes. So the crayon then becomes a tool for imagination in the
Mm.
hands of a child. It's no more
Mm.
just a crayon.
Yeah.
Okay. So every product of ours is
Mm.
is a tool for imagination or sensory experience that
Mm.
then helps the child grow, like which I spoke
Mm.
about earlier. So how are we different? One, in terms of what we offer. But,
Mm.
second is how we offer. When I
Mm.
say how, our entire philosophy or how we reach parents is through education. So we do a lot of
Mm.
workshops for parents where they understand how art can be used with your kids. Because uh, abroad, art is very evolved. People know how
Mm.
to use it. But in India, people are still figuring, what do I do with my child? And most of the time, parents we ourselves have this inhibition about, I'm not an artist, I'm not creative. Now, if I
Mm.
ask anybody to draw scenery, in most workshops, I ask them to
Mm.
draw scenery. How do you draw scenery typically?
Usually mountain, lake, sun.
You have that, right? And it's
Yeah.
so typical of all of us to think in that direction.
Mm.
But children don't do that.
Yeah.
Children, when you ask them to draw scenery, they just throw colors. Their sun will be purple, their water will be green. So
Mm.
their imagination is so different from how we visualize it. They are not
Mm.
conditioned. Okay, so
Mm.
in these workshops, we teach parents how they can allow that to happen with their kids, how they can encourage creativity, how our products can be used, and
Mm.
how they can create a space for art at home. And that
Mm.
really brings the customer closer to us.
Mm.
Because I think for us, customer or a mother or a father who's using the product is the center of our entire product
Yes.
or our experience, the experience that at Dabble, because we learn from them. If we
Mm.
don't have the customer, we have nothing.
Yeah. Even though the kids are the actual end users of the particular product, it's the
Yes.
parents who are going to buy them. So even though you have a kid's perspective in mind when making that product, its
Yes.
packaging, its branding, its appeal has everything to do with convincing a parent that it is good for their kid. So
Absolutely.
a lot of retail products which come in this space, they have to keep this in mind, because a lot of startup founders don't do this research properly. So uh, even for example, so I'll take this as a personal example, because we have a wedding invites e-commerce store. So we are still struggling to make a living out of it. We are obviously making money out of a offline wedding store, but
Yeah.
making that online has been very difficult for us,
Mm.
because we exactly don't know who is the target audience and who is everyone. So we are trying to do that, and I would like to ask you, add upon.
Mm.
So there are not a lot of retail startup founders out there. So as I mentioned before, when you mention startup, it's a SaaS product. That's what comes to
Yeah.
your mind. So when it comes to market research and retail, it's you can't take one away from the other.
Yes.
If it's a SaaS product, you can sit behind a computer. Once you get a user, you can just connect to them and ask him what is going on, what is out there. But
Yeah.
it doesn't work that way in retails. And having it kids focused. Obviously, you have to do a lot of market research, speak with a lot of parents and everything. So how is that journey different? Because as a startup founder myself, for other people who are also watching it, we'd like to know, how startup founders can do better market research, retail startup founders in particular.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important part of the
Mm.
whole journey. So just to see, one of the things that I would like to bring up here is a lot of times founders and even we,
Mm.
when we start, we think we have the most brilliant idea in the world, the best idea in the world, and we don't want to share it because
Mm.
somewhere there's this fear that if I share it, someone else will take
Someone is
it,
going to do it. Yeah.
right? And we also went through that, but then
Mm.
we realized that it is not about just sharing an idea, but how you execute it is
Mm.
that makes the world of the difference. It's not just the idea, because we
Mm.
can have 100 ideas, right? How you take it to execution is most important. So during this time, so when we started, when we had this idea, what we did is what worked for us is talking to people. Keep talking about your idea. You will keep refining it. Your pitch will keep refining because you will have something in your mind. Then you'll hear feedback. You will get more feedback. And that's when your idea will start refining. Second thing is also take your product out there and get feedback from customers. And that we did initially itself. What we did is our crayons that we were, went through multiple iterations or the paints that we made. We had a lot of playtimes with kids. We'd call parents, children, get them to use our products, also give competition products and see how they are using it. What is the benefit here? What's happening? How is it? And keep observing how people are using, because ours is a retail product, like you said. We were to observe what is happening, how the children are taking to it, what the parents are saying. So that was huge validation and feedback for us initially itself. And just to give you an example, initially, our box of crayons, we were supposed to have one box of just cars, another box stars, like that, theme based. But the idea that came from one of the parents in on the focus group discussion saying, how about just a box of shapes? Because I think their children get bored. And that was such an insight, that it doesn't have to be just multiple themes. It can be one box of shapes. And that came from the customer. So the more research you have, research your retailers, understand, I personally walked into several stores to understand what retailer had to say about the current art products, what was missing in the market. Talk to, your target audience, meet them personally, talk to them to show your product. I think it's such an important part. And we do that even today. It's not just when we started. Even today, we do FGDs, we talk to customers, and our community of parents give us feedback all the time about what's working, what's not working, what products do they would like to see in the market. So I think research is a continuous process. So for you to keep improving and growing, the more you research and are in touch with your customers, they give you everything that you need that you would want to sort of see materialize. And if something is not working, even then go back with feedback, saying, what happened? Like, why didn't this work? So those insights are valuable, very, very valuable.
So yeah, I mean, obviously taking feedback is one thing that any company in any size has to do, because ultimately whatever the user says determines the product is good or not. It's ultimately up to the users to decide. As you said, a founder can have a brilliant idea, but it'll get wasted if he doesn't listen to his users or doesn't do the testing properly. So yeah, that is something. And okay, so just tell me this. After Shark Tank, as you mentioned, you had 3x growth, right? So having that in mind, and obviously you got a good amount of funding and everything. So how do you plan to upscale and manage your inventory and upscale at the same time? So because if it's a SaaS product, the reason why I'm comparing this both is because a lot of people don't know the difference. Because for a SaaS product, the maximum overhead cost you can have is apart from employees, it's only server cost. But when it comes to retail, there's a lot more things. As you mentioned, you have a lot of workshops, art supplies and everything. So you have to calculate that cost also, inventory, manufacturing and everything. So how do you manage both?
It is a challenging process because, like taking the company from 1 to 3 is easy. But taking it from 3 to 8 or 3 to 10 is very challenging, like you said, because your working capital requirements really go up. You need to also invest in marketing. You need more resources. So scaling comes with these challenges. So one of the things that we are doing, which, because this is also new to us post Shark Tank, the kind of growth that we are seeing and also how we can grow, the kind of possibilities that we have. So one of the things is be very clear on your priorities. Like what is that you want to, which channel, for example, is going to give you the maximum, look at your P&L, understand where is that you need to put your energies. That is one important aspect. And know if you're choosing a particular channel, you need to understand why you're choosing that channel. What is it? Is it giving you marketing? Is it giving you reach? Is it giving you profitability? So it's important for you to understand that very clearly. Also, if you're choosing a particular channel, like for example, in our case, we are now going to go ahead with Hamleys. So it is it's a very big channel that we're going to be opening up, and it will also come with its working capital needs. But at the same time, do we have the online also scaling up in such a way that it will fund this requirement? Because there will be a gap otherwise, right?
Mm.
As founders, we had to bring in some money right before Shark Tank,
Yeah.
because we had to fund those working capital
Mm.
needs. And there are many financing options available if you wish to. That's also a possibility.
Mm.
But like I said, important to know your priorities, and when you and don't have. I mean, I think it's important to know your goals as to what you want to achieve in that at the end of the year. What
Mm.
is the kind of numbers you're looking at, and accordingly scale. Because if you, I mean, you don't have to be in a hurry, is what I'm saying. It's
Mm.
important to, and that's what we've done for Dabble, that we
Mm.
have grown, yes, our growth hasn't been exponential in the first 4 years, but
Mm.
our base or the foundation has been very strong to support this growth now.
Mm.
So yeah, that I think I would just say know your priorities and
Mm.
accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of goals, so how do you, what is, the next goal for Dabble now? Right now, as you said, you are there in all three forms of, retail, online stores, and everything. And now that you have a, you've reached obviously step 10 out of 100. So,
Yeah.
what is the next goal for Dabble? What do you have in mind?
So the next, so I would say we have an overall goal. It's to, from a larger
Mm.
term vision, is to be a dominant player in the area of art and play for kids
Mm.
in the early years. So that's our larger vision. Now we are
Mm.
working towards that vision, keeping that in mind. So
Mm.
we are scaling channels, because I think that, for us, that's been the biggest learning from Shark Tank as well,
Mm.
that we need to scale on, across channels. I mean,
Mm.
which are the channels that we want to scale? For example, there's certain retail stores we had said no to, but now we are
Mm.
keeping that in mind that this is also important. For example, Hamleys as marketing.
Mm.
So one, for this year, for us it is growing community, growing channels, and growing products. These are three
Mm.
things that we are working towards, because at the end of the day, all three feed into each other.
Mm.
The
Yeah.
community feeds into, so off our offline will also feed online, and
Mm.
vice versa. So
Yeah.
that's how we are looking at it this year.
Mm. I mean, that's good to know, but okay, so I have one follow-up question from that. You mentioned that you said no to a few retailers, right? May I
Hmm.
know why?
No to a few retailers.
You said no to a few retail shops, right? You
Yeah,
said that you said no to a few retail shops
yeah.
to place your products there. May I know why? What was the reason?
So there are a few things. One is, of course, knowing what kind of retail stores, because for
Mm.
it's important to know where your product will sell.
Mm.
Is it going to sell like in our case, is it going to sell in a stationery store or a toy store? So we have
Mm.
experimented that. So
Mm.
we are only looking at those stores which we think, which
Mm.
has our customer base and will work for us. Because at this stage, we don't like, we want to go with something which we know will work,
Mm.
because we have, like you said, the resources are limited. So we want to
Mm.
sort of channelize it into, stores which we think will work for us.
Mm.
Second thing is also, when we say no, the number of retail stores that have reached out to us after Shark Tank is crazy.
Mm.
So even there, being able to have certain parameters,
Mm.
that which retail stores will work, the same thing, that we will only go with, certain stores which have, in certain cities we're looking at. Second is in terms of having the, kind of products that, like toys, which work for us. So
Mm.
there are certain things that we have kept in mind while choosing those
Mm.
stores. So we're not going ahead with any and every store which comes our way.
Yeah, got it. So I just want to know. I was curious. So why you were saying no to so
Right.
basically sell your product. So yeah. So okay, this is more personal. So okay, so how your mindset has shifted from 4 years. So you started Dabble 4 years ago. So this is the
Yeah.
fourth anniversary. So how your mindset as a founder has
Mm.
shifted from back, what was there in your mind back then, and what do you have in mind right now? So how your focus, mindset, and everything has shifted.
Uh, so in terms of our vision, honestly,
Mm.
nothing has changed.
Mm.
The vision with which we started to now, I think back then, when we started off, it was more about the joy of creation,
Mm.
and how we are going to make this sort of reach parents. But today, as we speak, we're talking about how do we sort of penetrate, our scale across channels. How do we, sort of go global? What are the opportunities abroad? Uh, which are the markets that we can look at? In the kind of products that we are thinking about, how can we sort of scale the kind of products that we want to bring in terms of innovation into India? So I think our conversations are more about, growing bigger as a brand. But in terms of vision, I think we've stayed very strong right from the beginning uh, to be every child's first art experience. I think that's something that, that has stayed very strong with us. And in terms of, currently as founders, our mindset has moved from, the growth mindset is what we sort of carry, right? Because I think when you sort of start looking at opportunities and how you can then turn those opportunities into, work for you. I think that's something that, as founders is constantly, you need to start, be able to discover that, like, in yourself to be able to look at a challenge and how do you immediately turn that into an opportunity for yourself.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I think this is something that every founder has to go through. But having a vision that that hasn't changed for 4 years is like a attestation saying that what we have is right. And yeah, I would love to see Dabble across the globe. So hopefully, any Indian company that that goes global is a dream come true for every single founder. And I wish you all the best for all those things. And coming to the end, I'd like to have a final question. So, what would Karen like to say to young entrepreneurs out there?
Yeah, I think I've been a big fan of Steve Jobs, okay, because he's somebody who has really sort of impacted my life in a big way. There's one speech of his that I had seen many years ago, which is says, "Stay hungry, stay foolish," and he's addressing, some students and talking about how he was a college dropout and how he, like what really sort of motivated, and that's the whole thing stood around stay hungry, stay foolish. So I think for me, that is really, stood very close to my heart. So I would say, stay hungry because, it's important not to settle. You will have an idea if you keep evolving. You will face challenges as an entrepreneur, but the journey is about, how do you sort of come up with the solution, creative solutions, and there is this huge support system out there as an entrepreneurial community, like how we discovered NSRCEL, we discovered Shark Tank. There's a huge community who are rooting for you. So find your support system, don't settle, stay hungry, and you will find your answers. That's one thing. Second thing I would say is stay close to your customers, because you know that is like the wealth that which cannot be replaced by any kind of MBA jargon or any book, anything for that matter, because the closer you are to the customer, you will find your solutions. So I think these are just two things that I would like to leave the young entrepreneurs with. Stay hungry, stay close to your customers.
Yeah, I think that's something I would also like to tell people always. But yeah, I think this is a good place to end. So thanks for being here on the podcast. So it's an honor to talk with you. And so for people who are looking to where can they find you?
Yes, I was just going to say that. So today is our anniversary, and we also doing our website is full of offers. But and for you, if you want to buy for your nephew, you can go into www.dabbleplayer.com. That's our website. We are also available on Amazon, First Cry. We are also and many other platforms like Flipkart and other curated stores. But do walk into our any of the stores in Bangalore. There are a couple of stores, but soon we'll be in Hamleys. So what I would say, just log into our website and that you will get the best offers out there.
So yeah, so if people personally want to find you, where they can find you?
So they can contact me on my LinkedIn profile.
Okay. Yeah.
Saldanha. I'm also on them. So
Okay.
we'll connect with you and any insight on being an entrepreneur or following your passion. I'd be happy to connect.
Yeah, that's good to know. So I think that's a good place to wrap it up. And so for people listening who made it this far, thank you. And once again, thank you, Karen, for being on the show. So we are available on Brew Your Market on all socials, and I'm personally available at shashankism.com.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you and you made me comfortable. I think it's my first podcast as well.
Wow.
So to be a part of this.
Yeah, it's good to know. Thank you for being here. Once again, see you next week.
Thank you.